Good afternoon and welcome to Eni's 2020 update and Q1 results. We are going through an unprecedented times with the recent collapse in commodity prices caused by the twin factors of COVID-19 pandemic and supply glut. In facing this scenario, Eni is stronger than it was in the last downturn in 2014. Because in the past 6 years, we have transformed the company into a leaner and more efficient organization with a robust upstream, a restructured mid-downstream, and a solid balance sheet. Overall, these actions, coupled with the cost and CapEx reductions, have more than halved our all-in cash neutrality, while reducing our net debt. Today, in facing this new challenge, we are taking a number of initiatives that will further strengthen Eni both operationally and financially. We are assuming the lockdown until the end of May, and then a gradual demand recovery towards normality by the start of 2021. In the coming slide, I will detail our action plan for 2020. In these particular circumstances, all our actions are being based on the following priorities. People are always at the center of our strategy, and even more so now. Every decision we make is for the health and safety of all our employees and of all those that work with and around us. On top of this, we are taking strong action to reduce our costs across the business and deferring projects without impacting long-term value. In our operations, we will focus on preserving the integrity and continuity of our assets safely. To date, we have had no interruptions as a result of COVID-19. We consider that our low-cost resources and flexibilities across all businesses are distinctive competitive advantages, which we will leverage to keep our balance sheet strong while we maintain significant liquidity to pass through the weak scenario. This year, we will fully leverage the flexibility in our portfolio to reduce our CapEx by 2.3 billion euro. Equal to around 30% of the total annual CapEx originally planned, or 40% over the last 3 quarters of the year. Over 80% of the CapEx reduction is from upstream, where CapEx rephasing affects mainly new development projects by 35%, and production optimization by 20%. Also, exploration has been reduced, while in the other businesses we have optimized maintenance and logistics CapEx. Our portfolio is both resilient and flexible. The production optimization we have postponed can be restarted quickly as soon as appropriate market conditions appear, and related production will be recovered accordingly with limited loss of value. In addition to the investment cuts, we are carrying out a strong cost efficiency program in all our businesses and corporate functions. We expect an overall benefit of around 600 million euro in 2020, with around 40% of the savings coming from the upstream, with reduction mainly in OPEX and G&G costs, and the remainder across all the other businesses and the corporate. Our production cost, notwithstanding the lower production this year, is being optimized further, and we expect to keep it just below $6 per barrel, confirming our competitive position in the sector. Production in 2020 is expected to be around 1.75 to 1.8 million barrels of oil equivalent per day, before the OPEC cuts that are still unknown at field level. The lower production versus budget is two-thirds as a result of CapEx cuts and COVID-19, and one-third for lower gas demand mainly in Egypt and force majeure in Libya. A contingency of 40,000 barrels per day is still retained in our projects. With CapEx at around 4.3 billion euro, we expect to generate free cash flow for 1.5 billion euro in a $45 barrel scenario. The 2020 organic free cash flow of 1.5 billion euro shows a reduction of 2 billion versus the original budget of 3.5 billion euro at $6 Brent. The weaker scenario accounts for minus 3 billion euro, while the action we are taking to counteract the turmoil will result, even considering the lower production, in a positive effect of around 1 billion euro. To evaluate different scenarios, our free cash flow sensitivity, based on our current outlook, is 190 million euro for each dollar move in Brent. And now let me focus on the mid-downstream businesses. R&M has been the most affected by the virus containment measures, with a contraction in transport fuel consumption of up to 80% in the worst weeks of the pandemic. Oil product demand is expected to gradually recover with the easing of restrictions and the restart of industrial activities. We have optimized maintenance of our refineries, and we are continuing to run them at reduced operating level. Overall, we expect a yearly utilization rate of around 80%. In marketing, despite falling oil products demand, we expect EBIT in 2020 in the range of 300 million euros. In gas and power, we expect to record around 400 million euro of EBIT, with almost two-thirds coming from the resilient retail business. In Versalis, we expect to reduce losses by around two-thirds versus the last year's, thanks to a supportive scenario for steam cracking, more than offsetting COVID-related demand weakness, in particular for elastomers. Overall, the mid-downstream is expected to contribute for over 600 million euro of EBIT, slightly better than last year, notwithstanding the significant impact of COVID. These expected results, when excluding COVID effect, will also exceed the original 2020 budget that was around 1.3 billion euro. Moving now to the group's cash position. Cash flow from operation before working capital is expected to be 7.3 billion euro in our revised 45 Brent scenario. The reduction versus the original budget of 11.5 billion euro at $6 Brent is due to 5 billion euro of reduction made up of scenario effect, COVID impact, and remodulated production, partially mitigated by 800 million euro coming from the combination of cost saving for 600 million euro and better performance for 200 million euro. The expected cash flow from operation will more than cover the revised capital budget of around 5.5 billion euro. Turning now to our Q1 results. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we immediately put in place safety measures worldwide to protect our people and all those around us. In addition, Eni has launched a series of initiatives to help local stakeholders in areas in which it operates, and also made its supercomputers HPC5 available for coronavirus research. Turning to business, exploration continued to have success. In Angola, Block 1506, the Agogo discovery's oil in place was upgraded to 1 billion barrels as a result of the second successful appraisal well. In Mexico, the first well drilled in Block 10 resulted in an oil discovery containing up to 300 million barrels of oil in place. Several prospects have been identified nearby, and in case of success, they can be clusterized in a common development project. In Sharjah, Area B, we drilled the first well, discovering gas and condensate in just 1 year from the signing the block. The well has been tested with excellent flow rates that already proved the commercial viability of the discovery. Upstream production was 1.77 million barrels per day, minus 4% year-on-year, impacted by lower gas demand, together with the effect of contractual triggers and force majeure in Libya. These effects more than offset the increased production in Norway. Gas and power performance proved to be robust, notwithstanding the weakness of the LNG market. In R&M, the improvement was due to both marketing and refining, which in particular benefited from an enhanced industrial configuration and the higher contribution of the bio business. In the renewable business, in March we started 50 megawatt wind farm in Kazakhstan, and we have completed the acquisition of 49% of the Falk portfolio in the US, with an equity production of 57 megawatt. In the first 3 months of 2020, we generate 2 billion euro of cash flow from operation before working capital, a reduction versus last year, mainly due to the lower oil and gas scenario, but matching our capex requirements. Our balance sheet is strong. We can rely on 16 billion euro of liquidity to face the slowdown of activities related to the pandemic. In terms of economic results, upstream EBIT in Q1 was 1 billion euro, impacted for 1.1 billion euro by the lower oil and gas prices. On a comparable scenario basis, upstream EBIT was resilient, notwithstanding the lower production volumes. Moving to mid-downstream, the overall results improved by 40%, or 85%, excluding the COVID impact. Gas and power EBIT was robust at 430 million euro, up almost 30% year-on-year. This result was driven by the GLP business unit with 270 million euro of contribution, thanks to contract optimization and volatile market scenario. This positive performance was only partially offset by the lower contribution of the LNG business, related to the weakness in the Asian markets. In retail, Eni Gas e Luce delivered a result of almost 160 million euro, driven by the addition of almost 250,000 customers and the higher contribution from non-commodity activities, which offset the sales reduction linked to the virus, milder weather conditions, and increased expected default by clients. Refining and marketing was at 80 million euro, despite the challenging scenario. In particular, the refining business benefited from the optimization of industrial assets, lower operating costs, and from the positive contribution of the bio business, thanks to the Jayla plant ramp-up. The marketing result helped counterbalance the demand reduction related to the lockdown measures. Finally, the Versailles result was impacted by depressed demand, in particular in the automotive, building and construction sectors, and by competition from US producers. Turning now to the cash position, in Q1, adjusted cash flow from operation before working capital was 2 billion euro, matching our CapEx requirement. Excluding the scenario, COVID and non-cash derivative effects, cash flow would have improved year-on-year by 200 million euro. The balance sheet remained robust with leverage at 28%. To sum up, we have taken action in terms of CapEx, cost savings, and remuneration through the suspension of the buyback to recover 3.3 billion euro versus our original plans this year. In this new environment affected by the pandemic, with the consequent revised plan, we expect to produce between 1.75 and 1.8 million barrels per day, with the flexibility to reactivate production as the scenario improves. Our mid-downstream will continue to improve year-on-year despite the COVID pandemic. We will maintain sizable reserves of liquidity, which are currently around 16 billion euro, 3.5 times our short-term debt. Together, this action will allow us to navigate the challenging scenario while we maintain the highest standards of safety at work. Thank you very much. We are now ready to answer your questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the question and answer session. The first question comes from Oswald Clint of Bernstein. Please go ahead, sir.
Oh, thank you very much, Claudio. Thank you for getting onto the call in this tough time. So my first question, please. Thank you for the updated guidance here on 2020 cash flow. You're obviously using $45 for the year. It looks like the market's really gone to 35 for the year. So you've given the sensitivities quite clearly today, and obviously your cash flow would just cover CapEx therefore for 2020. So obvious question, but could you just talk about how you think about sustaining other distributions like the dividend at such a price level if it was to happen? Secondly, just on the downstream, pretty impressive Q1 with the operational improvements coming through, offsetting some of the COVID demand impacts. But could you just talk about 2Q so far in terms of gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and just whether you think some of those operational improvements might also come through to offset some of that demand weakness once again in the second quarter, please? Thank you.
Thank you. About the first questions, I think that to talk about dividend and what we are going to do with the dividend is not time now because the pandemic and the glut started just 1.5 months ago. So I think that we have to continue working, first of all, on the optimization of our CapEx, OpEx, G&A, all the possible optimization that we can do in our structure. We act very rapidly. We start immediately the first week of March. We have a first revision in the March 19, and then 10 days ago, less than 10 days ago, we finalized the revision that we presented today, and we are continuing to fine-tuning and and also execute this revision in our subsidiaries. So we will see the next couple of months how the COVID-19 will evolve. In our assumptions, also in terms of price and in terms of COVID-19, we think that by the end of May, the critical phase is finished, so we start gradually to recover the consumption and go through a possible new normal situation by the end of the year. So we will see what is going to happen in May, in June, and July, and in July we can update on the dividend. We run different scenario clearly. We didn't just run 45. We ran a 40. We ran a 35. We still have flexibility clearly, flexibility in the cost reductions, and it's something that we can apply if the scenario remain less attractive than what we thought at the beginning, $45, and then we can think about the dividend, but not now because we, it just happened. We don't want to react immediately before having a clear idea of what we can do in terms of efficiency inside our company. For the question about refinery, it's true, refinery worked very well. We can say that the biorefineries were very positive, both in Venice and Jayla. From a R&M point of view, they work a lot of cost efficiency on the logistics, on the stocks, and we can have some additional improvement on that. Also, if now the situation in March was, I think, the most critical in terms of transportation and consumption, because during the week we had an average of 70% reduction and about 80% during the weekend. Now is improving, so the good news that is improving, some percentage point, but is improving. So we are following up, and we'll see what is going to happen in May. We think that in May the situation in terms of transportation and consumption will be better, especially for gasoline. Diesel consumption was, I can say, good also during this period, because the heavy truck continued to work for transport materials and food, so that was less impacted. But I think that we can recover also on gasoline.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
The next question is from Michele Della Vigna of Goldman Sachs. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for taking my question. And Claudio, congratulations and best of luck for your new mandate. I had two questions, if I may. The first one is around the CapEx and OpEx cuts. I was wondering if how much in your mind is cyclical and just belongs to this really difficult time in the market, and how much you think could be sticky even at the time of a recovery. We've seen before how the industry in difficult times manages to put through cost cuts, which actually then can become quite sticky even after the price recovers. And then my second question is about price dislocations. We're seeing a lot of dislocation in the physical crude markets, and I was wondering through your business where perhaps you see realizations really starting to diverge versus Brent. Thank you.
So I answer about the, maybe with the help of Sandro, about what you asked about the cyclicity, if this kind of situation is cyclical, or how we can manage this kind of up and down in our upstream business in terms of prices, and then maybe about prices in diverging between Brent. I don't know if Massimo or Pino can answer. I give them time to think about, and I answer to the first question. So, Michele, in the last 6 years, we had a very low price. We have up and down. For that reason, we started already before, but we change also our way of developing fields and all of our way how to select the field that we want to develop, and try to explain better this, what I mean. First of all, as you know very well, we put a lot of focus on the exploration to be very resilient in terms of cost, because our exploration cost is less than $1 per barrel. So we start from a very strong basis. Then we start working on short cycle. What I mean for short cycle, also for big projects, we start working on phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, to be able to capture with a very good with a good time to market the cash flow return, the return on the project. So we don't do any more, the super giant project where we put all the investment up front and then we start recovering. Because of that reason, because today we can have $60, tomorrow 80, and then we can jump down to $30. So you must be very, very fast in your development. Clearly, the world needs energy. Until December, the consumption was at 1.2 million barrels per day on average, yearly average. So we need oil, we need gas, we need energy. So we have to adapt ourselves, and we must have the flexibility to be able to be inside this short cycle. For that, you must have the right asset and also the right strategy in terms of development and the geography where you are, to exploit at the maximum level your position and the position of your consumers, so your customers, we can say. So that is my answer to your question. Now I give the floor to Pino to talk about the diverging price between Brent and other crudes.
The volatility of the differential volatility of the crudes, of course, we are in a period where in only 1 week we change completely the spread between Brent, Ural, or Brent or Middle East crudes. And the question is to try to take the maximum advantage of this volatility. Of course, in the last months, we took advantage to buy crude for our refining system with a very good discount on OSP, on the official pricing. And about the equity production, we tried also to maximize the use of our equity production in our refining system in order to avoid to be damaged from the sale of our crude on the market.
Okay, if I may add something on this, Michele. So talking about the average price we got in the first quarter, the average has been versus Brent -5 versus -2.6 that was in the first quarter of 2019. But I would say that the -5 is more normal than the -2.6 we had last year. Do you remember last year? The aviar oil had, I would say, a very high quotation on the market because of the first uppercuts, Venezuela, and so forth. Now, the -5 is more in line with what we have seen in the past, giving some advantage to our refinery system that you remember is quite complex. In terms of sales, I would like to add that all the forward sales in May
has been already placed as far as our equity production. So everything has been sold.
Thank you.
The next question comes from Alessandro Pozzi of Mediobanca. Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Good morning, all. I wanted to go back to the comment about the flexibility in costs, and I was wondering where are the areas where you think you can take a bit more decisive actions in the event the oil price remain depressed. I'm asking that because, compared to the last downturn, I think oil majors are much leaner, so potentially the room for cutting costs maybe on the OPEX side may not be that great, and therefore you have to lean on the CAPEX side. And maybe a follow-on from that, can you give us a bit more color on what projects you put brakes on? Because I think you reduced the CAPEX by 30%, and which other projects are still going ahead? Thank you.
Thank you. So I give the floor to Sandro Puliti to answer your question.
Okay. Good morning. So the reduction in CAPEX was basically allocated for 400 million to production optimization activity, that means on the short cycle, and 1.2 billion that is allocated on the long cycle, the main projects. The main projects that have been postponed are the Rovuma LNG in Angola, our activities in the Cabaça North, Agogo, the Merakes in Indonesia, expenditure in Iraq, in Zubair, some reduction in Egypt, and in the UAE. Those are the main areas where we postpone projects to achieve cost reduction this year. On top of that, there are 300 million of reduction on the exploration activity. So, definitely, how we can do more? Clearly, doing more, we can do it in further rationalization in our operation, especially on the operating cost side.
Okay, thank you.
Just to complete, just to give you more color on this, how we can be resilient if the price is lower, or what we can do more. You have to think that this exercise of revision of our CAPEX, OPEX, and costs generally has been performed practically in 1 month. So we reacted immediately. I said we started the first week of March, but we can do much more working on with each single subsidiary inside the inner costs. We are a big company, so it's something that we can perform further and we can optimize, and the exercise is not finished. We run fast to give immediately, to be immediately in the right side, and to clearly to impact positively the year. But this optimization is going to continue. For that reason, we run sensitivity at $35 or $40, and we continue to understand how to optimize it. So it's something that, the budget we presented the strategy. I've been working for 5, 6, 7 months, and now in practically 1.5 months, working with all the people, starting from top down and then bottom up. We revise, we make an aggression. We have been very aggressive and determined to do that, and now we continue to finalize. So not just in the upstream, we have several other components where we are looking inside corporate cost and G&A. So a broad range of costs that we can optimize, and we have optimized, also changing organization and structure to be even more flexible and resilient in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Just maybe a second one on the tax rate. It's been fairly high in Q1 in the upstream, but I guess that's mainly a reflection of the lower oil price. Can you give us a guidance for the tax rate for the rest of the year? Thank you.
Thank you.
So the tax rate, targeting a $45 per barrel for average this year means a lower oil price for the remaining 9 months. It means that we expect, an increase in the E&P tax rate that is correlated to the oil price. So we expect for this reason a tax rate adjusted for the full year that will be more or less same level, around 100% as you have seen in the first quarter. A different story as far as the cash tax rate, because of the different composition in this environment between deferred taxes and cash taxes, we will project a reduction in cash taxes to be paid. That's the reason why we expect a decrease in the cash tax rate from the 33% we had in 2019 to around 25% in 2020.
Thank you. Very clear. Thanks.
The next question is from Thomas Adolff of Credit Suisse. Please go ahead, sir.
Good morning, good afternoon. I've got a few questions, please. Just firstly on cash flow. Obviously, cash flow is one thing and working capital is another thing. If you can't sell what you produce and you don't get paid what you sell, then obviously the cash flow would look worse than your base case. So I wondered if you can give some guidance for working capital and how that evolves over the balance of the year. Secondly, I wondered if you can also give a comment on the supply chain. Obviously, we're seeing major disruptions there. Are you seeing any major issues there that could impact your operations? And then finally, if I may, just on global gas, you've announced obviously force majeure in Libya. What does that mean in terms of production? You probably have some issues in Indonesia. You've highlighted issues in Egypt. What is Zohr producing there? And what generally is happening to your LNG portfolio? Is your share of spot LNG higher than in 2019? Thank you.
So I think for the cash flow, working capital, Massimo, and then supply chain, Sandro Politi, and then for the LNG and the gas issue and force majeure between Christian and Sandro Politi, they can answer.
Okay, so as far as the working capital, you have seen that we absorbed in the first quarter 640 million euro because of the seasonality, but much better than in the first quarter 2019 that contained some, you probably remember, some special item. We paid around 300 million for an arbitration, and definitely we are taking advantage from the decrease in the prices environment that is giving us an advantage. So we are cashing in bills that we issue in 19 when the oil price and the gas prices were higher, and we are releasing new bills with lower scenario. Projecting what we expect for the full year is a bit complex because of the reason that you mentioned. So the market is really volatile. But can I say that taking into consideration what we expect in terms of I would say a higher probability of default from our clients, mainly in gas and power, retail specifically, we can project a cash absorption for the full year that could be, I would say, in the range of 100 to 300 million. So let's say an average of 200 million cash absorption for the full 2020.
Can I just quickly just follow up on the working capital? Obviously, the comment you made just now, the release, that's the LIFO, FIFO effect, right? Inventory losses and inventory gains, or the offset in the cash flow. So I was just wondering about the underlying working capital effect, not the LIFO, FIFO.
Well, the underlying is more or less stable, so we do not expect a significant change in respect to what we have seen last year, so remaining more or less flat. So out of the, for the full year, out of the 100, 300, so 200 million, I would say the most important deterioration is linked to the reduced level of cash-in from our clients. So if you take this out, we'll be in the range of between 0 and minus 100.
Okay, thank you.
The next question is from Lydia.
It's not finished now. We have other two questions to answer. Sandro and then Christian.
Okay, regarding supply chain and disruption due to the pandemic, the pandemic is mostly affecting those activities that requires international support and mobilization, and therefore we are suspending or rephasing most of our drilling and especially the deep water drilling activities. While on production operation, always with the aim to protect our people while granting production continuity, we have been able to maintain production level thanks to the fact that we have a prevalence of local workforce in our producing countries, so we are not affected by the blockage of traveling between countries. And then we also reinforced our headquarter support where possible, and we have identified critical manpower and optimized HR management. And then we have also improved our supply chain monitoring regarding spare parts to ensure their availability and advance booking and delivery. Now I leave the floor to Christian for...
Yeah. Hello, everybody. So when it comes to, let's say, the global gas environment, clearly we enter in 2020, which already the fundamentals were very weak in terms of, supply, balance, and demand. Just to remind, in the first quarter of 2020, there has been 15 million tons of more LNG floating around due to the startup of U.S. LNG trains vis-a-vis last year quarter. Clearly, the lockdown linked to the pandemic has increased, let's say, the weakness of the market due to the demand disruption. We have seen it firstly in China in February, but I have to say that now we see China picking up in terms of demand and actually recovering from that slump. But clearly Europe has been affected. So let's say, all in all, this weak market environment has affected also, let's say, our results. But as you can see from the result of the first quarter, our exposure to LNG spot prices are fairly limited. In fact, we are growing our portfolio of LNG, and we try to balance and to manage the exposure to that balance. And so our, let's say, exposure to spot prices are not that high. So that's why you don't see a huge impact on the results.
Thank you.
The next question is from Lydia Rainforth of Barclays. Please go ahead, madam.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Two questions, if I could. The first one was on the strategy presentation, and I appreciate it was only a month ago and that a lot has changed since then. But does the current crisis that we're going through, and depending on the duration, change how you think that might evolve? So does it mean that you accelerate some of your energy transition ambitions, or is it really sort of too early to think about that? And then the second one was more of a social question as to can you talk about some of the initiatives that Eni has been deploying in terms of response to the pandemic, and there's been a lot of brilliant examples of the help that Eni has been giving to the wider society. But what initiatives are you seeing making the most difference? So, for example, the supercomputer being used for the virus modelling. Thanks.
I take the first questions, and I know Massimo for the second questions. First of all, the long term don't change at all, because I think looking at what is happening, I think more to accelerate the long term. It means that the action to go through a different kind of retail products, so green or blue or bio, that are working well now, and they are really resilient and give a good balance with the traditional business. I think that to counterbalance then this possible volatility that we'll see in the future, what we presented in the long term has to be improved and maybe accelerated. Clearly, we have to understand how, and also find the means, the money to accelerate it. We have also, as I said during the strategy, we are working through a different organization that will be useful to accelerate and also to reduce our overall structural cost. But for sure, that remain our main target, to continue and to go to really to work on the scope 1, 2, and also the scope 3. And that is our plan, and we go ahead with determination. The second question, Massimo?
So, second question about what we are doing. So, we are doing something in Italy and abroad. So, in Italy, mainly, we are helping hospitals to deal with, to cope with this critical moment. So, we provide them breathing systems. We had them to set up additional beds to assist the more critical people. We did it everywhere in Italy, from south to north. And maybe I leave the floor to Alessandro to give you some detail about what we are doing abroad.
Okay, abroad basically we are adopting same strategy. In each of our subsidiaries we are in contact with the local health authorities, and according to their needs we are helping in the response to the COVID by providing either beds, ventilators, or personal protective equipment when required, and always in accordance with the local health authorities.
Gentlemen, would you like the next question? The next question is from Jason Kenny of Santander. Please go ahead.
Good morning, and wishing everyone at Eni and on this call good health and sanity at this time, crazy as it is. I've got a couple of questions, if I may. The first on going back to CapEx. Out of the 5.5 billion euros, how much of that is absolute minimum maintenance CapEx, do you think, in 2020? And then the second question, I think you commented that the 1.75 to 1.8 million barrel a day volume guidance for this year is pre-OPEC cuts. I'm just wondering if any of the OPEC nations, or indeed any country that is going to support production cuts later in the year, has contacted you about field restrictions. I know you've mentioned a 40,000 barrel a day contingency. Is that purely for possible OPEC cuts, or is it contingency on operational procedures? Just a bit more colour around where volumes might be impacted if OPEC were to contact you? Thanks.
Okay, Sandra, you can start talking about, I think, both, because the first question is about the minimum CapEx for maintenance, and the second, if somebody's already contacted us and if there is a contingency in the contingency for OPEC cut.
Okay, so we always divide our CapEx in CapEx that are related to development project, production optimization, and also what we call it as mandatory CapEx, that are the one that are related to our asset, basically our asset integrity. So the level of that CapEx is around 2 billion euros per year. So this is our minimum CapEx level that we have to maintain to ensure full asset integrity of our operation. And the other question?
OPEX. First,
OPEX,
if
OPEX
countries start contacting us and we have contingency in our plan.
Okay. In our plan, we have a contingency of 40,000 barrels of oil equivalent per day that is covering also possibility of some OPEC cut. Although to date we don't have any request recorded to date of OPEC cuts from our producing countries.
Okay, many thanks.
The next question is from Irene Himona of Société Générale. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I had two questions, please. Firstly, thinking about the two affiliates now, ADNOC and Vår Energy, can you tell us what they contributed to the first quarter results, either in terms of profit or dividend, and then what you expect from them for the full year, please? And my second question, Claudio, as you mentioned, you worked hard over the last few years to strengthen the balance sheet, and all your actions in response to this crisis is indeed to protect the integrity of the balance sheet. What would be the maximum, the ceiling level of leverage that in this environment you would be prepared to tolerate? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that for the first question, also the second question, Massimo can answer, please.
Okay, so as far as ADNOC and Vår, in terms of cash, we talking about Vår, we already cashed in our share of 150 million of dividend. That is the first quarter dividend. So because of the situation, definitely we distributed what was available to be distributed in the first quarter, and then we are waiting for, more clear information ahead in order to decide what to do in the remaining 3 quarters. So last year we distributed something in the range of 850, 100%. I would say more clear decision on this respect will be taken probably in June, July, talking about the second quarter and the remaining quarters. Maybe Pino could give you some additional detail as far as ADNOC, and then I'll be back talking about the leverage.
ADNOC in the first quarter of this year had the general turnaround of Ruwais East and West. The general turnaround is already finished and happened just in the same time of the development of crisis in China for COVID. So this is a good news. Now the units are already in operation, and the refinery is quite empty because the turnaround, so is ready to supply the Far East where the crisis is finishing and the consumption is increasing. So we consider to be in a good situation to cover the market after the crisis from Ruwais. Notwithstanding this, we considered in the second quarter a conservative throughput of the refinery, around 60%, considering the queue in April of the turnaround and the ramp up slowly in parallel with the growth of the consumption and the full utilization in the second half of the year.
And Irene, in terms of leverage, so it's a bit difficult to make such a projection this year due to the very high volatility. For sure, we will be a bit more precise in July, presenting the first semester. The first attempt should be this year, notwithstanding all this volatility, to try to stay below 0.4 in terms of maximum leverage.
Thank you very much.
The next question comes from Mr. Martin Ratz of Morgan Stanley. Please go ahead, sir.
Hi, hello. Thanks for taking my questions. Frankly, a lot of them have already been asked, so I only had one. So clearly, 1Q saw a significant sort of decline in earnings, but it doesn't look like 2Q is going to look any better, and it's a little difficult to gauge how much what the incremental impact is from here on 2Q results. Now, the closer we get to second quarter results, the more difficult it is, I would imagine, for you to brief the market on it. So this might be an opportune time. Could you talk us through generally what your observations are when it comes to the second quarter and the factors that could impact earnings from here on?
Sorry, if I well understood, you want to understand some color about the second Q and how can be for us, because didn't catch your question.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So as I told you, we can analyze from different point of view, because in the COVID-19 is really propagating in different parts of the world with different timing. What I can say that from a downstream point of view, from a retail or marketing point of view, we see that we have some recoveries and is recovering. And also, you see that refining in the first quarter, in any case, in marketing worked quite well in a very quite difficult conditions. So I hope that we can see some recovery in the second quarter in terms of consumption. That means consumption means also that will be easier also for our productions. I cannot give you from a quantitative point of view, because I will be able just to give you at the end of the quarter. But I think I see the progression positively respect to the last 1.5 months. From a production point of view, that means that what our production in Middle East or Far East is, as Massimo or Pino said before, for May and June we already sell our production. That is a good point, and we see a recovery in China and generally in East Asia. So if that happens completely and we can have a recovery as expected of about 70-80% on the consumption, that means that give space for our production in the area. Then we have Africa. Africa is linked in terms of our production to the European market, and the European market is, as I said before, for Italy is improving. Also in other countries, in Germany is already improving. It's better than in Italy. If it's improving also for other country, could be good also for our production in Africa. We have another point that is not just COVID-19, is how the OPEC Plus program will be implemented, because that is clearly going to impact on the price, and as soon they start implementing, I think that we can have an improvement in the price. So should be positive from that point of view in terms of recovery, for the reason I said. Clearly we have to analyze and understand the impact of COVID, and so the impact in terms of time of COVID, and the implementation of the OPEC Plus resolutions. So if the two things are working in the positive way, I think that we can have some recovery in the second quarter. But as we said this morning, the situation is very volatile, and we have to understand now, for end of April and May, what is really going to happen for these 2 points.
Okay, thank you.
The next question is from John Rigby of UBS. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah. Can you just, given we're on the call, just give a bit more colour, detail around the two areas where you're producing below capacity? So Libya with the force majeure, Egypt, I think you referenced demand. Just sort of, if you can give me a little bit more detail about around that, and also perhaps some indication of how far below theoretical capacity you're running in both those countries. Thanks.
Can you answer, please?
Okay. So, situation of force majeure in Libya is detected now by two main events. One is the lock of all the ports in the east side of the country that is blocking basically the oil production of Libya. And recently we registered also an illegal closure of a valve on the coastal line for gas distribution. So currently we have these two events that are reducing production for Libya. Our expectation are that by end of June situation should be back to normal, and this will allow us to recover around 40,000 barrels of oil equivalent of production from equity production from Libya. Regarding Egypt, situation is still recording a low gas demand, low internal gas demand due to the COVID situation, especially nowadays. But we do expect a recovery of the demand with the summer, increase of temperature, and so more consumption for power generation. So we expect a recovery of the demand in Egypt in the second half of the year.
Thanks, that's great.
The next question comes from Christian Malek of JP Morgan. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my questions, and I do hope you're keeping healthy and safe, and the same to my esteemed counterparts. Sorry to come back on the dividend, but it seems to me that on the critical path of the dividend decision is whether we see an end to lockdowns next month. I appreciate it's certainly not binary and there are many variables, but would it be fair to say that if nothing has changed 3 months from now, you would actively cut the dividend to protect the gearing and your future capex? Because the way it currently stands, the capital frame does appear already constrained. It seems you're working very hard to protect it with gearing moving higher. And I just want to understand what the industrial logic is to keep the dividend at these levels through cycle and not just in 2020. Secondly, and I guess linked to the gearing, is there a threshold for yourselves and the board, like a red line you wouldn't cross if oil prices remain low and gearing continues to rise? Thank you.
Massimo, please.
On both questions, Claudio.
Understood the first one. I didn't understand the second one.
No, the first one is about the dividend and the say.
I understood the first.
The rationale to judge about the future decision on dividend. So may I try to answer, and you can definitely complement, Claudio. So, Christian, what you said is not completely right. So, we are not going to take the decision about the dividend looking at the lockdown only, and we are not taking the decision looking at what's going on in 2020 only. So, what we are going to evaluate mid-year is a more complex environment, including, by definition, what we expect in 2021. So, definitely, if we see a recovery in the overall situation, including prices, during 2020, in order not to, compromise our balance sheet equilibrium, and we see a price in 2021 that is close to our cash neutrality, I would say that the decision would be in some direction. If the situation would be different than I just figure out, the decision would be probably the opposite. Now, as I answered to Irene, we try to fix the maximum level of leverage, not the gearing, but I would say you can calculate the difference easily. That is the maximum 0.4 we would like not to cross in 2020. But even on this, we will be more precise when we elaborate a bit more in July, based on additional information that we have as far as what's going on in 2020 and what we can more grounded we can judge about what's going on in 2021.
So, if I can complement what Massimo said. Now, first of all, we are working a quarter. It's just 1.5 months, clearly. We as a company, as an energy company and the oil and gas company, we work on long cycle. So may make a projection and talking about details with a statistic of 1.5 months is absolutely incorrect. Is not only possible, but is not reasonable. Clearly, when you talk about gearing, Massimo said, and I agree, the gearing is based on the gearing that I can have is based on the medium term. So what I can do this year and next year in the 3 years, how we can recover my debt. So it's something that is made by different variables. At the moment, we have really few elements. Clearly, we showed from the beginnings in the last 6 years that the debt, so the gearing and the leverage, is very important for us, is a priority, is one also of the basis of our remuneration policies. But in this case, we have to understand if what happened in 2020 can be recovered in 2021. I cannot, and it's wrong to react after 1.5 months and change everything drastically, also for my shareholders. I cannot be schizophrenic without having the right parameters to take a decision, share with my shareholder and explaining why. The range of hypotheses and the guess are too many now to take this kind of decision. We said very clearly, and we demonstrated that is a priority, the capital allocation, the gearing, the dividend, but I cannot be reacting like if I run a small motorcycle. I'm running a big truck, I'm running the life of a lot of people, I have my shareholders, I have to be reasonable in each step I take. That is my answer.
Thank you.
The next question is from Biraj Borkhataria of Royal Bank of Canada. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my questions. Just a couple of quick ones. So the first one's on your R&M guidance this year is 300 million. That would suggest earnings up year on year, and given the current environment, at least heading into Q2, looks quite challenging. So could you just run through the assumptions behind that? And then the second question, another easy one, is for Egypt, that's one of the countries you've highlighted for the year-on-year declines in volume. Could you just highlight what the contribution you expect to your 2020 production budget is for that? Thank you.
I understand the second question, that is for Sandro. I didn't understand anything about the first question. Honestly, if you Massimo, you're from there, because I didn't catch what he said. Sorry.
So the question is about the assumption underlying our guidance in R&M full year result, about 300 million. I guess that Pino would be in the position to answer.
No, about this is very simple. In our crash program to improve the efficiency, again to the good result of the ramp up of Jayla Biorefinery, and some optimization in the marketing cover in part the effect of scenario and COVID, and that we have evaluated in more than 800 million. So with this improvement in this area, together with the strong cost cutting and re-optimization of the maintenance in the refineries, allow us to confirm a guidance of 300 million for the year.
Sandro?
Okay, regarding Egypt production and the contribution to the overall Eni production in 2020, it is around 300,000 barrels of oil equivalent as an average of the year.
Great, thank you.
The next question comes from Mr. Peter Lowe of Redburn. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Just one left. In your scenario, you see a recovery to $55 oil in 2021, but you still intend to cut capex even further in that year. Can you perhaps just explain what's the driver of that? And then as a follow-up, would investment at that level be enough to maintain your production flat, or should we then assume it's kind of declining at that level of spending? Thank you.
Massimo?
But the answer right now would be yes. So even if the scenario will be 55, we will intend to reduce capex as we said. Nothing new versus what we said 1 month ago when we revised our scenario. So 45 this year and 55 next year. It means that we are giving some priority to recover what we are losing in 2020, thanks to the cuts, reducing a little bit our production expectation, but giving priority to the cash in order to increase the cash to be generated that year. So we said that thanks to this action, we expect that all in all, our cash neutrality will drop to around $52 per barrel, giving us the possibility to live with some comfort in a world of 55. So the decision would be to keep the capex cuts in order to increase the cash generation, keeping production same level as is expected in 2020.
Thank you.
For any further questions, please press star and 1 on your touch-tone telephone.
If there are no questions, please let's close the call here. Thank you.
There are no questions registered, sir.
Okay, thank you very much,
Thank
everyone.
you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.